Welcome in to another episode of Her Game Plans Fantasy Hot or Not list, breaking down fantasy football and giving you your starts and sits of the week in the NFL. Let's talk about week 8. Holy scoring. Just when I thought I was going to lose in my big money league, I came out of the woodworks with some unexpected players making some unexpectedly big performances. My heart goes out to my Ferguson fantasy football team. Our name is Gibbs on the Gridiron, with our leading man being Jahmyr Gibbs himself. Love all of you so much. Now, granted, my Tyreek Blinders in my all-girls league, I was 7-0. I was undefeated until I was let down and lost by 2.1 points. I wanted to quit fantasy football. I did indeed. But here I am, committing to my love-hate relationship with fantasy football. Because we have our highs and we have our lows. Now, granted, I am in 4 leagues and I went 1-4 this week. My Dynasty League did not do great. My defensive players did not do well. And my Family League, I also did not do well. I lost my dad. So, good W, Dad. Good W. But enough about me and my fantasy football nightmares. Let's go ahead and teach you how to play fantasy football, and that is in our fantasy football fundamentals segment. Let's get into it. Welcome to another segment of Fantasy Football Fundamentals. If you are new here, welcome. This segment is all about breaking down different fantasy football fundamentals for you to be able to better understand how to play the game. Now, this week we are going to talk about trading in the spirits of it being NFL trade week, and I'm sure your league's deadline for trading is coming up. In one of my leagues, it's week 11. Most leagues, it's week 11. So let's go ahead and talk about trading in fantasy football. First off, we have to understand player value, their current performance of a player. Think of it as like evaluating your friends based on how well they've been doing in their hobbies. A friend who nails every karaoke night might seem great, but if they usually can't carry a tune, you might want to be cautious. That's a brutal example. That is such a brutal example. But basically, you want to make sure that your player that you are considering to trade or trading for is going to be consistently giving the performances that you've seen throughout the season. And also injury status. Injuries have been a big thing this year. So if a player is injured, it's kind of like your favorite shoe getting a scuff. It's not broken, but it's definitely not in its tip-top shape. So their value does go down. So whether they are currently on the IR or just out for a couple of weeks, you want to make sure you're looking to see, when they're going to come back and how well you believe in their bounce back. Position scarcity, right? Some positions in fantasy football are the hottest trends in fashion. If a certain style is hard to find, like a reliable tight end, if you listened to the episode yesterday, you know why I'm winking at you, that player might be more valuable. If you have a lot of that style, you can trade it away without worry. So let's say you have 5 running backs, but only 3 wide receivers. You will essentially be okay trading one of those running backs for maybe 2 wide receivers to help build your depth on your roster, because after the trade deadline, you can only depend on free agents, and that's sometimes scary. And lastly, understanding player value is matchup considerations. Players facing weaker teams are like your go-to outfit for a casual hangout. It's likely to shine. If a player is set to face an easy opponent, their value spikes. But if you look at their schedule and see that they have a harder schedule and you're trying to trade for that player, it might be worth considering not. So when do we know when to trade, right? Let's talk about it. Buy low, sell high. This is like spotting a great sale on a pair of shoes you've been eyeing. If a player isn't performing well, but has potential, it's a good time to grab them buying low. You're buying them at a lower price because they're not performing well, but you're expecting their performance to skyrocket, right? If a player has been on fire, it might be a good time to trade them away so you can get more in return for that player. Buy low, sell high. Another time to trade is after a big performance. If a player has a standout game, their value is kind of like going viral on TikTok. Everyone's talking about it. This might be the perfect time to trade while their value is high. So you know how a trend on TikTok is only good for a little bit? You want to do that TikTok trend within that window before you look lame, which is usually me on TikTok. So make sure that if you're considering to trade that player, that you want to trade them after a great performance, not after a bad one. And lastly, during bye weeks, when one player of your star players is on bye week, it's like them taking a vacation. Other managers might need someone to fill in, making them more likely to trade. So keeping an eye out for those bye weeks to see what other teams may need and if you can trade a player to them during a bye week where they have a need. Now let's talk about making trade offers. Know your league. Understand your friends and your league mates. If someone has a favorite player, they might be willing to trade more for them, just like a friend might trade a trendy dress for your chic handbag. So you just want to start by making a trade, right? Make fair offers. When you're proposing a trade, you want to look at both sides and be like, okay, I'm giving away this much. I need to make sure I'm getting this much in return. Vice versa. Make sure that you are offering plenty to get what you need in return. And also highlight the positives. When you're sitting there trying to trade, be like, listen, I am very attached to Gibbs, but have you seen how explosive he's been? I want to talk about all of his highlight performances, and that way I'm selling them. You're like the greatest salesman on earth trying to get rid of these players in return for some needs that you might have on your roster. And my biggest advice on trading is don't be scared. It can be nerve-wracking, but always be open for counteroffers, right? Don't be scared to just try something out. Send a trade over, see what you think, have a conversation, and don't be afraid to walk away, right? Don't be scared, but always be open for a counteroffer, which is basically when you send an offer and your league mate will send a counteroffer back, or somebody sends you a trade and you're like, I don't like that. Let me tweak it a little bit. Let me add a little bit on my side, add a little bit of that on their side, swap out some players, whatever you want. But always be open to counteroffers and don't be scared because you have this. And remember, it is just fantasy football. Love-hate relationship, but it is just fantasy football. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our hot or not list. Welcome into another episode or another segment. I can't talk today. My brain is fried. Hot or not list. Your starts and sits for your fantasy football team. And remember, ladies, this is my opinion. I have had some sits that have gone off. For example, Sam Laporta last week was in the double digit for points, but I forgot that it was National Tight End Day. And I've had some hots that, maybe weren't the best to date that week. Remember, it is all unpredictable, and this is just my opinion. So let's get into it. We're starting hot, we're starting fresh, we're starting with the spicy players, we're starting with our hot list. The players we want to date this week. And our running back hot member of the week is Tennessee Titans running back Tony Pollard. Hear me out. Tony Pollard entered the season as probably part of a timeshare in the running back room, so he's going to share time with another player. But Pollard is truly a 3-down back. He is in there first, second, and third down. He's rarely taken out. His role is so good that he's still getting carries deep into the fourth quarter with his team trailing by 4 touchdowns against the Lions this past week. So this week, things should be much more in Pollard's favor. They're at home against the New England Patriots. They're not that good. Tennessee's not that good, but this should be a better game for Pollard because the Patriots allow 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs. Pollard is a great running back. He's just had a tough year with not a great team against some tough opponents. Cut him some slack. He's hot this week. I have not one hot receiver for you, but two. And you're going to understand why. Los Angeles Rams wide receivers, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Let's talk about Puka. Puka is back with no hesitations. He comes back from injury, bounces back. He is immaculate. In his return from the IR, Puka has 7 catches for 106 yards. No score, but that doesn't matter because he's going to get his slice this week when they play Seattle. And as for Cooper Kupp, he's also back. No hesitations. He comes back from injury, has 5 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. Stafford loves his wide receivers, so both Puka and Cooper Kupp are going to be hot this week. Mark my words. They were hot last week, and they're hot this week. Moving on to our tight end, a not-so-sexy team, but a hot player this week, Jacksonville Jaguars tight end Evan Ingram as they take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, you just heard me say Eagles and you say, Brooklyn, why would you put Evan Ingram up against the Eagles? Well, it's because the Jags are experiencing the injury bug, let's just say. And specifically, their wide receiver room. Christian Kirk is now out for the season with a broken collarbone. Brian Thomas Jr., day-to-day with a rib injury. Gabe Davis, day-to-day with a re-aggravated shoulder injury. With 3 wideouts being out or possibly playing with these lingering injuries, Evan Ingram's target share is going to go up significantly. So whether those receivers are out, obviously skyrockets. Even if they're in, they're still banged up. So Evan Ingram, we're going to date you this week. All right, who's not? Who's not it this week? Who's a player that we just want to sit on the bench because it's just not their time to shine this week because it doesn't look like the best outcome for them? Starting with Denver Broncos running back Javonte Williams as they go up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Javonte Williams ran for 44 yards on 17 carries against the league's worst run defense. The math is not mathing. This week, he goes up against the Baltimore Ravens, who allow the 9th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. They rank 4th in the league in a rush defense success rate, and their 3.3 yards per carry allowed is the lowest in the league. No running back should be played going up against the Baltimore Ravens if you can help it. Now, this week, where the Denver Broncos will have to throw if they want to move the ball, the Ravens are ultimately a pass funnel defense. Perhaps Williams can get some points by catching the ball, but as for the run game, it's a no-go. Javonte Williams is a not this week. A tough pill to swallow here, but Arizona Cardinals rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. as he goes up against the Chicago Bears. Big reason for this is that Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't lived up to the rookie hype. He hasn't lived up to the hype of what he could be. He did have his second career 100 receiving yard game with, 6 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown last week. But he takes on the Chicago Bears this week. The Bears completely shut down Jaden Daniels, the Commanders quarterback, last week. Shut him down. Along with that, the Bears will have allowed 11th fewest points in fantasy per game to the wide receivers. So we're going to wipe our hands clean of Marvin Harrison Jr. this week and sit him on our bench. And for our tight end, it's going to be Buffalo Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid. He's very touchdown dependent, and I would know because I have him in one of my leagues. Very fun, very not. With only scoring twice in the end zone this season, he's only had 4 fantasy performances in the double digits. But this week, he goes up against the Miami Dolphins, who in the past 4 weeks, on average, have only allowed 3.87 points to the tight ends. So although they haven't been winning a lot of games, the Miami Dolphins, they are great at defending tight ends. So Dalton Kincaid, you are on the bench this week, sir. And that is going to wrap up this episode of Her Game Plans Fantasy Hot or Not list. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, listen on all the things. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. You name it, I'm everywhere. And I want to hear from you. So go ahead and give me your feedback on one of these platforms. And I will see you ladies next week. Good luck in all of your fantasy matchups this week. Mwah. Play the field and own the game. I'll see you guys next week.